Well, welcome to the workshop. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll have three sections and discussion after each one. This is for people, was created for people who don't give speeches very often, but all of a sudden have to give a speech. I realize there's probably lots of other people. So that is what started this particular presentation. And I considered it help. I have to give a speech. What do I do? So what I'm going to do is go through the checklist that is available. Some of you may have seen it, but some may have had time to look at it. And we will discuss the tips, and then we'll see if there's any points that you would like to discuss. So before I go through that, why is it important to be able to communicate? I happened to Google public speaking and what are the benefits. And this is what came up. It helps you with your career advancement because if you are as smart or as intelligent as anyone else, but you cannot communicate your ideas, people don't know about your skills and your thoughts. So if you're brilliant and you have two people who are equally brilliant, the one who can communicate and share their ideas and work with others is known and it helps them in their career. But it also boosts your confidence. You find that you will ultimately be doing things that you've never done before in your life because you say, oh, I've never done that, but I'll give it a try because of your self-confidence and critical thinking. Because when you have to give a presentation, often you have to research it and say, what can I share? What are the ideas? And you actually learn a lot when you are presenting and teaching or informing others. And so it's your personal development, enormous. It changes your life. I can assure you it changed my life since I learned the skills. Because when I was young, I didn't want to speak in classroom. I wanted to crawl under the desk if the teacher asked me a question. So it makes a big change. It improves, of course, your communication skills, not only at school or at work, but even with your family, your friends, and in your community, because you're not afraid to speak up and you have some ideas. And of course, you meet new people. It helps you with your personal satisfaction. It changes your life, as I said. It helps expand your network of people because you've spoken in front of people and you learn how to be persuasive, and it's all part the basis of leadership skills. So that's why this is so important. Now, I assume most of you know who Warren Buffett is. He's probably one of the most famous investors. He's now in his 90s. But he, early in his time, said one of the most important things he ever did was he went to a public speaking course called the Dale Carnegie, and he spent money on it. And he said that is the most important. So often when he is being interviewed or there's a group of people, they often ask him, what can you tell us is important? How do we become successful? And this is what he always says. If you can communicate well, you have an enormous advantage. So that's why it's important. So I want to, as I said, there's three parts. We will talk about preparation before you do the presentation. Then have a discussion if you have any questions. Then the second part will be, what do you do on the day that you make a presentation? What are some of the things you should do and prepare? And then what do you do after the presentation? So let's start with before presentation. You need to create a present, your speech or your presentation. And the most important element is your opening, your body, and the conclusion. So you want to tell people how important it is to learn about these skills. And now we're going to talk with the body, the three things that I'm going to talk about before, during, and after. So you have three things in the body. Three, the power of three is very important. If you have 10 or 20, it's not very helpful. And I do have a long list here, but it's still broken into three groups. And then you have a conclusion where you sum up after, this is what we told you. So you tell them what you're going to tell them in the opening and say, this is why it's important. You then inform them within the body of the conclusion and, sorry, of the speech, and then you have your conclusion. So that is important, and we can review, if you are, how to go about doing that, because in the template that I sent out recently, there is some information on how to do that. But I'm not going to go into detail on how to create a speech, but it is very important that you have an opening body and conclusion. The next thing is the language. So I don't encourage you to write your speech out fully. It is not a bad thing to do. And sometimes it is very helpful, particularly when you're first starting. However, when you're presenting it, be careful. You don't want to read a speech. You want to learn. So consider using, when you are looking at, language, consider using like a mind map. And I do have an example of a mind map in what we sent you, the latest information. And we can discuss mind map at a certain point in time near the end or after in the discussion. And do not use, when you're talking about language, do not use acronyms, things that people don't understand unless you are speaking to a group of people who use those acronyms. Maybe you're in the medical field, like Alhamdu said. Well, then you will understand some of the technology and the terminology. But if you're talking to a group of people who are not involved, don't start talking in acronyms and say, oh, in the computer industry, there are so many acronyms that you wouldn't understand. It sounds like they're speaking another language. Be very careful of that when you are using a language. And you don't want it to be, you're not trying to impress people with your great vocabulary and have complicated words. In fact, I attended a presentation by a very excellent public speaker. He was keynote speaker, and one thing he pointed out is try and get it down to a lower level of like grade 4 or grade 5. Don't use long convoluted words, which a lot of people will not understand. So be careful of that. That's in the tips in the template/checklist. And then the last one in this group is, if you're giving a presentation, tell the people or the person who's going to introduce you the title of your speech and a little bit about you and who you are, and also what the topic is. So let them introduce you. You don't have to then go through and tell a lot about it. So the next item when you preparing is, know how much time you have. And when you are working on a speech, you speak in approximately 120 to maybe 140 words per minute. So it's often useful to time yourself, either record it and time it, or just prepare your speech, and or count the words if you've written it out. If you write it out, and you can then say, oh, I've got 5 minutes, and so 5 minutes times 120 means I have 620 words is what I'm looking for example. And it's very important to know what time you're allotted and how much time you're taking. You don't want to, I have often, you've probably been in places, I'll be very short, and an hour later, they're still talking. And then the other idea is the flow of the meeting. Have your sentences move slowly from one to the next. Make a point, maybe even repeat it when it's important, and try and say it in different words and illustrate it once more to be clear, be clear. And don't have sudden jolts and go off on tangents. Try and keep to what you're saying. And stories and images. Stories are what people remember. So often tell a story. I told you a little bit about why I did this, about the group of people who were trying to get money from the government to help in their outdoor activities and the clubs and organizations. That's what prompted this. That was a story that I told you. There are, so I can tell you about one person that I've been working with. He wrote a book about his life. He was a delinquent when he was growing up. He lived on the streets, and this is in Canada where I lived. And then after writing the book, people want him to talk about it because it's a very fascinating story. Now he's almost 40 years old now, and he is now having to give a presentation in the next week's time to 400 people. And this has been a challenge, but we've been working with him and coaching him, and he is going to do phenomenal because he's been practicing it. But his stories are unbelievable. You will not forget his story about his life and what he learned by living on the streets when he was a teenager and what happened to him and what he does now with his life and what he learned. It is an amazing story, and any images that you can share. Now, humor is often useful, but it can be a challenge. So use it very carefully and appropriately, because you can upset people if you misuse humor, but it can be very powerful because people love hearing humor. And often tell about yourself. Like I told you, I used to want to crawl under the desk when I was young. I never had the ability to speak in class. I was very, very nervous when I was young. And I wish when I was young I had the opportunity to learn the skills. But I'm glad I have now learned the skills on communication. And the other thing is trying not to be too formal. These are your friends. When you are giving a presentation, your friends are there and they want to hear what you have to say. And I often suggest, imagine even if there's 400 people, even if there's 110 people in your classroom, in your class that you're giving a speech to, think about them that they've come, these are your friends, and they've come to hear what you have to say. It's like you invited them over to your house and they're all there and you want to have a conversation with them. And you're explaining to them about, public speaking or something in the medical field or some of your life skills and some things you've learned. And you want to share with that. So it's a conversation you're having. You're not trying to impress people with, your vocabulary or how smart you are, etc. So conversational style is so talk to your audience and explain to them and use your vocal variety, etc., which we will cover. And if you're using PowerPoint or slides, be very careful that your slides do not have too much text on them. If possible, just have points, and then you can talk about, that point. PowerPoint can be helpful, but it can also be a big challenge. So what you want to do is use photographs if possible, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, as they say. And slides uh, can be very helpful, but they can also be deaf by PowerPoint. If you've ever seen, they just have lots of text and the people are just reading their slides. That's not often helpful. There are times when it works. The fellow that I mentioned who's going to talk about his book, he doesn't use slides, but he does use notes and he almost reads it. But he has practiced so much that you can hardly know that he's reading it because it is a fascinating story, but it is a long story because he's telling you about many years of his life. The other thing is if you can have a mentor, someone that can take time and share with you, it could be a family member and they could give you some feedback. So practice. And I have put here practice plus, 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 plus. And as Sohail said at the beginning, practice is important. The more you practice, the easier it gets, and it helps you with that challenge of nervousness. And if possible, you should record it. Now, this is the last item on this before we open up for discussion. And I have 1, 2, 3 here. One, when you record it, if it's on video, watch it, but first turn off the sound and just watch your gestures and see what you look like. So you're not listening. And then the second is listen to it. Don't watch it and listen to what you sound like. Are you nervous and you're in a hurry and you are, um, because that often happens when you're nervous and you talk quickly and all of a sudden you'll notice those things. Are you using a lot of filler words, etc., or not? So now I want to open it up for discussion. So I'm going to stop my sharing my screen and see if you have any questions or any comments about any of what we've said, what you can do before you give a speech. And again, there's a lot of things here. It's not as if you have to work through all of them. The idea is here's a checklist and you go through it and say, oh, I should work on my opening body and conclusion. I don't know how to do that. And there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of information where you can learn it, including at Agra. Any comments, any thoughts about this is all preparation? Any
Yes,
comments?
I may say something. I think there should be a logical relation. One step should lead automatically to the next step. Suppose when you start your speech, there would be opening remarks, or I call it introduction, and you may said during introduction that what you want to uh, bring out during this speech, or what is its background. Then there is aim of the presentation, that what you want to achieve from that presentation. Then there comes the main body, and in the main body, whatever you want to say, that should be, I mean, prioritize in a systematic fashion, that each step should automatically and logically lead to the next one. So there is continuous flow in the speech, and the idea is developed from is simple things to more complex things. Then comes the end, I mean conclusion. Then say that from your main body, I mean the which you have carried out the discussion of the main body in form of presentation. Now, what is your conclusion? What is your final verdict? Then that will be given, so the people are clear what was the aim, and now what is the final verdict of the individual who is giving presentation.
Yes, thanks, Sohail. I mean, that sums up very nicely. You know, the opening, you tell them what you're going to tell them. And then in the body, you tell them, all the points that you want about that topic. And at the end, you sum up and say, well, now this is what I've told you. And hopefully you have a powerful message at the end. So that's very important. I saw Jacob came, but he disappeared. So interesting. I was going to ask him a question, but he disappeared before that. Maybe I scared him off. So the next part, I'm going, if there's no other comments, I will go back to sharing my screen and go to the net. What do you do during? And during is your appearance. Be careful you don't have any distracting things like a t-shirt that has a phrase on it that's not appropriate or something, or you're dressed properly and appropriate when you are speaking. Maybe you're in the classroom, you know how to dress appropriately. And arrive early. It's important you have time to become familiar with where you're speaking and to relax and to cover your nervousness. And there are certain things that you can do about nervousness. Find techniques you can use, relax your body, stretch, deep breathing, listening to music, and I'll cover that like visualization. If you're in the Olympics and you're competing with people, they always visualize they're going to do well. So very important. And the same thing, you're going to say, oh, these are my friends and they're going to enjoy this. And I can see them enjoying it. Visualize it. And positive self-talk. And also to help with anxiety, if you have time, practice it in front of small audience, your friend, your family. And that can help you a lot to manage your nerves because you'll be very familiar. So the more you've practiced, but during the day, just go in front and maybe before you get on stage, just practice deep breathing, maybe listen to music, do some stretches, etc. So now the time you get on the stage, go to the front. Don't just slowly walk onto the stage. Show that you're excited, you're interested. So go there with a spring in your step. And it shows you that you're happy to be there. And if there is somebody introducing you, shake their hand and then relax. And what I say by relax, now you're looking at the audience, but don't start immediately. Take a breath and look at the audience and look around. Smile. Take 10 seconds. May take a long 10 seconds, maybe 5 seconds. But before you start, just take a breath, look around. Now, I've got this, and relax, and then give your greeting. Now, the greeting could be very formal, but it can also be included after. You might say, today I'm going to talk about the importance of public speaking and how it's going to change your life. And then you can say, chairman and so on. Or you can start with chairman, etc. But think about you greeting your audience. And timer, what are you going to do about timing? Do you have a watch? Do you have maybe your smartphone? Maybe you could put it on, if you have a lectern, you could put it there. Or maybe you could have somebody in the audience, maybe a friend, and say, can you time me? I only have 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever it is. Let's keep track of that. But be aware of how much time because it can get away with you if you're not. So you may have a timer, you may not, but arrange that. And then language, use pauses. Try and avoid filler words, the the ums, like. I always talk about one of my favorite stories. I was listening to the radio, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. They were interviewing a man who was very good at baking bread and all sorts of cakes and so on. In the 15 or 20 minute, I was listening to this. I was driving my car. He said, 125 times, and he's not aware of it. Like, I love cooking, and baking, I make great cakes, He was using that so many times in a sentence, and he wasn't aware of it. So this is why recording yourself when you're doing it will help a lot, and it'll avoid that. So language is important. Do not use filler words. Try and have a pause, especially after some point that you've made. And then gestures. Often we don't know what to do with our hands. I've seen people put their hands in their pockets. Oh, or put their hands across their arms because they don't know what to do with it. Just let your hands and arms hang by your side, and eventually you'll feel comfortable because gestures and the way you look and you look at the audience is a higher percentage of your communication skills is the way you appear more so than what you say. So it's very important. So gestures are important. Now, eye contact as well. Try if you're giving a presentation, look at the audience, find some friendly face. Sometimes people say, oh, I find that scary. But then look at their foreheads. They don't know that you're not looking at their eyes. Just look around a little bit and maybe as if you were talking to an individual if you have a big audience. So that's something that Alhamdu could probably do when he's speaking to 110 people in his classroom. And vocal variety is important. Just don't speak monotone and just say, oh, it's very important you use vocal variety. Use different tone. different speed, different volumes, because you get excited and important about something, or maybe you want to talk quietly and use your personality. Let people know who you are, because if you have natural traits, we're all different. And, in, and put a little bit of that personality that you have into your speech. And of course, timing again, I mentioned um, timing is and energy and passion. Because if you're passionate about this topic, it will show, and people will be interested in as well. And keep aware of your timing as well. And don't worry if you forgot something or something didn't go exactly the way you planned it. People don't notice that. They don't know that you were going to say something that you didn't. Oh, I forgot to tell them that. Doesn't matter. You do the best you can be. And then your closing is probably the most important part. That is where you emphasize what your message was or what you were trying to share and why it's important to them, why public speaking can change their life. That, and then congratulations for getting to that. So with that, I would like to open it up for discussion again. Any comments about all of these things that I said? Alhamdu, I don't know if that's helping you at all, but hopefully it will help you. You're muted, Alhamdu.
Muted.
Now you can talk. Is any of this resonating with you, Alhamdu?
Yes, sir. It's actually helping. It's helping, so I'm following.
Okay. So Sohail, I think you might have put your hand up there. I'm not sure. Did you
Yes,
have any?
of course.
Yeah.
I just want to say from my personal experience that once during a presentation, during opening remarks, my legs were trembling. I was so nervous. But I had carried out a lot of rehearsal of the opening remarks, particularly that I was knowing, in spite of trembling legs, I was saying right thing and I was speaking okay. And after 2-3 minutes, I was uh, absolutely okay. And then I carried on with the presentation. So the conclusion is one should carry out a lot of rehearsals. And if there is a problem of nervousness, the rehearsal can uh, counteract it. Counteract it in a good way. And the second point, I support Fred that if you can't see in the eyes, then see on forehead, and people will not come to know that you are not, looking into their eyes. They will take it as you are maintaining eye contact. These were the some points which I wanted to say.
Thank you, Sohail. And I agree with you enormously. Any other points from anyone at this time when you're presenting? Maybe something that you want to share? Mike.
Very minor point, Hamdu. When you have a large audience in front of you, remember Zorro. You know Zorro, the guy with the sword?
Okay,
No?
yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Zorro.
yeah.
Look at the back of the audience, across the audience, then diagonally through the audience, and then back at the bottom through, side to side. And that way, people in the audience think you're looking at them. Yeah, they don't know where you're looking because you're just looking in a Z shape, but they think you're looking at them. Yeah, people like to be connected with. Yeah, people like to participate in the speech.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you very much. I'll go on to the last section, which is probably the shortest section, which is after. What are the things you should do after? And here we go. So after, you want to get some feedback. Now, often if you are presenting and you are in a class or something, you have a friend, hopefully, you could say, could you please do me a favor? Tell me what I did well, maybe something that I could have improved on, and what was the best part of the speech. It's very important after, especially make notes if possible. I suggest even a speech journal. I have a book that I have, and I often make notes about speeches I give, the comments, because the next time I want to give a speech, I can refer to it. It's very good. Listen carefully to the feedback. And also, though, understand everybody sees presentations differently. You think you told them A, B, and C, but they only really heard B because that's what they're really interested in, because they listen through their life experiences. So understand the feedback you'll get is different from different people. They say, well, I like this. Another person say, well, I like that. But that's what you also learn by getting feedback and what people liked and what they thought could improve. Some people will tell you one thing, another tell you a total opposite. But that's good for you to realize you can't be perfect. You didn't get 100% of the audience to understand exactly everything the same. But the feedback is important and how you can improve. And ask what went well, what could I improve, but what was the best part, and review your speech and notes. And the other thing is also, if you are presenting and you're interested in presenting this speech somewhere else, ask if anybody in the audience, like the fellow I mentioned, we're working on, who's
Yeah, thank you.
going to give 400 people, it will open up more opportunities when he talks about his life story. Because his life story is fascinating, absolutely amazing what he went through as a delinquent on the streets in Victoria, where I live in Canada. And now what he's learned from that, and people can learn a lot from his life experience, but it'll open up more doors. So think about maybe there's a chance, and the more times you give a speech, the better and stronger it will be. Now, Yuri is planning to give a speech that she's already given at an Agora club, and she's planning to give it probably the same speech again, and she can practice it a few times. The more you practice, the more you give the speech, the better, and it'll help you make more confident in your abilities. So that is time for discussion. What you should do after. Anything that you can think about. Any tips? Yes, Mike.
I think with feedback is very important. And for me, when somebody's preparing a speech to deliver, the job is not done until after the meeting. What I ask people to do is to take the feedback they have received, and don't forget, the speaker is also part of the feedback. He knows, she knows how well the speech went, what went well, what did they forget, what would they add next time. But to take all of that feedback and incorporate it into the speech they've just delivered. So you use all of that feedback and don't waste it and just let it go, but put it into the speech, because so often you will give the same speech several times. So what you've got as feedback this time, put it in the speech, it improves the speech. And then when you come to update it for a subsequent delivery, yeah, all of this feedback is already in there. Yeah, and the ideas that you were given. So feedback is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah,
And
I even, sorry.
negative feedback is worth more than positive feedback. Yeah, it's so easy to say to somebody, oh, well done, that was a great speech, eh? Great, 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 great. It's not so easy to say, that was a good speech, but, and remember that word, but, it's a terrible word, but there's work to come. But remember to talk louder. Remember to talk slower. Yeah, or give people some feedback that's negative, but it will improve their speech in the future. So don't just tell people sugarcoating feedback, but give them real feedback that will help them improve, even though it's a negative, maybe perceived as negative, but it's important. People need to know what didn't go quite so well that could have come out better. Yeah, so that is feedback, very valuable. And also, as I said at the beginning, don't forget you were there at the speech. What feedback have you got to add to the speech and improve the speech, even though you're not going to deliver it, in the next 2 weeks, 3 months, but put that feedback into the speech and then file it away. Then the job is finished. Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Mike. And that's why I suggest if you can have a speech journal if possible, but maybe you're not giving a lot of speeches and you don't want to do it, but write it down so you can pull it out again, put it where the checklist is, pull it out and say, okay, this is what I've learned last time. It's very important. It can help you enormously improve. The feedback is probably the most important part. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. Slideshow, there we go. All right. So I just want to tie this up in the end. This is what Gerald Ford said. He was the president of the United States. He said, if I went back to college again, I'd concentrate on two areas, learning to write and to speak before an audience. Nothing in life is more important than the ability to communicate effectively. It's like what I said to you previously. If you have two people, same skills, but the one can communicate, share their ideas, help each other improve, and solve problems, this person does happier and more successful life than this person who cannot communicate and actually gets frustrated. So these skills are probably the most important skills that will change your life. It will open doors that you've never had thought you could do, and you get self-confidence. So another thing is what's come through is you prepare, you practice, you get feedback, you learn, and you keep on going, and you will improve. This is anxiety. But you can overcome it by practice and some of the techniques we've said. And I just want to close with what the mission statement of Agora speakers is. Agora empowers you to become a brilliant communicator and a confident leader who will actively build a better world. And I just want to emphasize you cannot build a better world if you don't take leadership. And you cannot take leadership if you cannot communicate. So the basis of making changes in your life, not only, and when we're talking about the better world, it doesn't mean you're becoming the prime minister or the president. It means you're just helping others, even in your family and your friends. And that is building a better world. So I just want to end with why Agora speakers? Because when you realize that you all need each other and that we can all learn from each other, your stage fright will go away. And these are some of the skills that we practice in Agora speakers. Agora speakers cost nothing. There's no fees. We don't sell anything. There's nothing for sale. It's all run by volunteers. And we practice public speaking. We practice leadership skills, critical thinking, and debating and argumentation. And if you ever interested in reaching out to me, I think you have my email address. But I'm Fred Jones. I'm an ambassador for Agora Speakers for Canada and Agora Speakers youth programs. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording